Good morning, guys. I'm Kathryn, and this is Little Bits of Heaven Homestead. So I was digging up and transplanting some of my drought-tolerant plants yesterday, and I wanted to share my process with you guys because I realized that I can't be the only person in YouTube land that lives in a land of water scarcity. I know that California through the years has battled their own not only minor incidents of drought, but some pretty major ones. I'm in New Mexico. We are kind of always in drought conditions. That's not necessarily true. It's right now we're not technically in a drought, but I like to live my lifestyle just generally as though water is a precious resource, because it is a precious resource. I know that there are lots of people in YouTube land that live in the East Coast, and you're dealing with an abundance of water right now. And I know that the Midwest has been flooding over the summer, so to have an entire video dedicated to plants that not only thrive in conditions that water is not necessary, maybe counterintuitive to YouTube world, but there's a whole lot of us that live out here in desert land. And so I wanted to cater a video specifically to you guys. So my yard typically looks like chickens landscaped it. I put a lot of time and effort into my landscaping. I call my chickens my chicken destroyers. They run around, and what they're notorious for, and you can actually put them to use on your homestead for this purpose, is they're diggers. They love to look for bugs, grubs, worms, anything underground. And so they are the ultimate tilling machines. And so they will go into, specifically here, anytime I put any sort of water on the ground, it's like a magnet to them. And they come running and they dig up whatever it is that I just watered. So you can imagine that that makes it kind of hard to not only grow a garden with chickens around, but also to landscape. I also, our yard is pretty wide open. I have a lot of animals that come through. We do live on the border of the forest, so I have to take into account things like javelina, which for those of you that aren't familiar, they're pigs. They're not feral pigs. They're not like domestic pigs that have been turned loose, but they're actual, and they're not part of the pig family, but that's the best way to describe them. They're known as peccary. But they come through. They tend to pick on things like cacti, so they're not so much an issue for me. But deer come through, and they pretty much level anything that they think might potentially be delicious or look delicious. So I have found some things. I've been in my current property for 15 years, and so over the 15 years I have found some plants that thrive in not only low water conditions, but also with our local wildlife that cruises through. So one of my favorite plants is this one right here. And this is called a Russian sage. And it's not a sage as far as culinary. I do believe that it has some medicinal properties. I've never used it for that purpose. It's a beautiful plant. It's easy to propagate. It wants to be here. It thrives here. And so I'm all on board with that. My bees and all sorts of pollinators love it. It starts blooming. It is the 1st of May today. And so you can see that it's not blooming yet. In fact, here where I'm at, we have the potential for freezing for about another 2 weeks. So I've got all of my native plants. They're starting to come to life with spring, but they're not quite full yet. And so this is my favorite time of year to dig up and transplant. And it's ridiculously easy to propagate some of these plants. So let me show you real quick. So this is one I planted last year. And this is one I went and dug up off of another one of my plants. They do send out, they have one long taproot, but then they also send out these little shoots as babies. So I'll find these all over my yard, usually within about 3 foot or so of the parent plant. And I've got a whole bunch in this other bed over here that I need to go dig up. The parent plant actually died, but I've got about half a dozen babies that it sent out. And so I'm going to be digging them up and moving them today too. So, but this is, let's see if I can lean you in here without destroying things. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see. It's got kind of this woody branch trunk. And then down here at the bottom, you can see, ooh, can you guys see this? This is all relatively new growth. It's not woody, it's real soft. This is a baby right here to this plant. And so what I'm gonna do, let's see if I can do this. Guys. Okay. So what I've got is I've got my pots pre-prepared. and I dug about, I have them about half full, filled with soil, and it's not potting soil or anything I bought. It's stuff that I dug up around my yard, and then I incorporate rabbit manure into it. So it's about half soil, half rabbit manure in my pots ready to go. And I could dig this up and put it directly into the ground and it would thrive. I have found best success if I go ahead and pot them up for about a month and then move them. And mostly that's because I can keep the pots up close to the house and water them and make sure that they get well established in their pots before I go and stick them out in the ground, where I am, more often than not, I put them a little further away from my hose, and I'm not enthusiastic about dragging a hose all around the yard. So sometimes, or a lot of the time, they get neglected. So the stronger they are and more established they are when I plant them out in their final destination, the better they are. So, but I have had great success and I kind of manhandle them, but when I rip them out of the ground, I can just go stick them into the ground and they'll do just fine. A lot of times you will deal with transplant shock, where it looks like they die back to like dead, and just be patient. More than often than not, they will come back. So let me show you guys digging this up and repotting it. So I'm going for the baby here. I don't want to dig too deep. Since this parent plant is right here, I don't want to destroy the roots to the parent plant. And if you get any sort of rooting, and it doesn't look that impressive, but these will survive. And I could actually divide this up, and I'm probably going to do that. What I'll do is I'll cut this in half and I'll make 2 different plants out of it. And so I just take it and stick it in my, so it's half full of dirt. I just set it in there. Okay. And ta-da! So there we go, there's a Russian sage. I need to do that with the second one here too. I do this, let's see if I can take you guys for a quick tour here. Oh, okay, let's see. Okay, so welcome to my front yard. So there is a whole series of these types of plants. Let's see if I can do this without falling. But you can do this too. It's not just Russian sages. So let's see here. I potted up some plants yesterday. This one here. This is a salvia, and I love salvias. Oh, and there is a whole bunch of different types of salvias. Hummingbirds love these, butterflies love these, bumblebees love these, and these are some of my early bloomers, and it will keep blooms on it throughout the entire summer and fall. And so this is one that is an absolute favorite of mine. This one's a little different to dig up and to transplant. Let me grab my shovel and I'll show you. So this is actually a baby from a parent plant that I planted years ago. And I've divided and transplanted this, not this one, this is one I planted last year, but from the parent plant, I've got dozens of them throughout my yard. And again, this is a no to low water plant. So let me grab my shovel and I'll show you transplanting this one. So on salvias, let's see if you guys can see me, what I do is I just come and along the edge And this one you don't necessarily have to have baby plants. You just want to get on the edge of the plant itself. And just kind of break some off there. I'm going to dig on this side too. And look at this, guys. So, do you see this? This is all roots here. And so when, let's see, there we go. So all I gotta do is stick this into the ground, into a pot, or like I said, directly into the ground, and this will not only grow, but this is gonna thrive. And so this is one of my favorites, like I said. Oh, look at those pretty flowers. So now I've got, just from this, I can do at least 3 other salvia plants. And so I'll be sticking these around my yard. I love to put them on the perimeter where I'm not necessarily mowing or weeding, because these will outcompete weeds. And like I said, no water. So for those of you who are living in desert and drought conditions, don't give up hope as far as landscaping. There is lots of options for you. So like I said, salvias, one of my favorites. Pollinators love them. Russian sages, love them, probably my favorite flower ever. And then things like, let's see, purple cone flowers, also known as echinacea. That has done well for me here. They are also easy to divide and propagate. And that's one, I found one growing over here. This is, I don't know if you guys can see, this is my mint. And it has just taken over. We have a downspout to our evaporative cooler right there. And so I would not grow mint here otherwise, just because it is so water loving. But if you can find locations where you have a source of water, so for us, that's our evaporative cooler. It drains several times a day, so that's not something I have to maintain, it's maintaining itself. But it is super invasive, as you can see. And so I've got some other salvias, not this type of salvia, but I do have a salvia that has germinated over in here in my mint, so I'm going to have to dig it up, and that will also provide me some plants to divide and put around my yard. So this is my spring. I spent a lot of time transplanting and dividing. Last year I divided and transplanted and planted over 200 drought tolerant plants. I think my chickens allowed maybe 20 of them to survive. And although that sounds crazy and discouraging, that is 20 more plants than I started with. And they're free, so I can't complain there. It helps me hone my skill, it makes me practice, I just love bringing life into this world. And so it's kind of exciting to go from a parent plant and make dozens and dozens of babies and get them out in the ground, and some of them make them, some of them don't. That's homesteading life. I think that's just life, is not everything is guaranteed, and so you do your best to nurture it and you hope for the best, and sometimes we make it, sometimes we don't. But specifically these guys, they have really good success rates. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope this was of value. If you don't already subscribe to my channel, please do so. If you wouldn't mind liking and sharing this video, I do appreciate it. As always, there is links in the description on ways that you can help support our homestead. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye, guys.